What up, what up, what up, Stripe Gang? We back up in here. I know I ain't seen y'all in a minute. I've been kind of MIA for a second, but we in the slow season, the lull of the NFL cycle. So I felt like doing a whole bunch of mini camp and OTA stuff would be overkill. Nothing really important going on until right about now. We getting ready to take off. It's preseason eve, as most of y'all know. I'm sure y'all all probably know. Been paying attention. This Thursday, August 11th, I do believe. I gotta look at my watch. But Thursday, August 11th, tomorrow, August 12th, we got the Arizona Cardinals in a semi-meaningful um, preseason game. As you know, like the way the preseason is played now, especially with a 17-game season, um, you're not going to see starters from probably too much of any team. You may, the second preseason game, they might use that for their dress rehearsal. Starters get a series or two, but as far as the Bengals go, they're playing almost no starters um, in this first preseason game with the Arizona Cardinals, and it's boring. Talking about the top of the roster right now, which is a good thing. It's a good problem to have for a fan base because a lot of years, especially again long suffering Bengals fans, we spent a lot of years wondering who the starters are gonna be. These guys from the previous year that the fan base pretty much want to see get uprooted out of their starting spot due to lack of performance, whatever else have you. But we just we lost the chip by this much, so we have already a Super Bowl roster, and what that's gonna mean is that the majority of the roster battles on this team, I would even say more so than the middle of the depth chart, or really down at the bottom of the depth chart at most positions. Which is why again you won't see no starters. Um, you won't see no starters playing in the first preseason game of the year. Um, with the exception of Jackson Carmen, which to me, if you ask me, it's a good sign of what they're getting so far out of Cordell Volson. The fact that, you know, they feel the need to put Jackson Carmen in live action, given how his last season happened and then the off season stuff we ain't gonna get into. But from all accounts, he's come back now looking like a pro, like he's taking the game serious, which was something that he gonna have to go out and prove on a week in week out basis this season, just because of how bad last season went. Though he did show flashes that if he can play at the top of his game, he'll be a legitimate starting NFL guard at least, and eventually with the chance to be at least an elite run blocking guard in my estimation over the course of his career if he played at the top of his game. But so that's the only top of the roster battle spot between Jackson Carmen and Cordell Volson. Everything else, like I said, it's a good thing, but everything else is pretty much down the roster. And from what I understand, the left guard, it's Carmen's job to lose, and so far they've been impressed with him this offseason. But I believe Volson is putting enough pressure on him to where, they got to see it in live action before they start to trust Carmen enough to really hand him the keys to that starting spot. Um, Another roster battle that I think will probably have the most impact on the season is that running back number two spot. That in the competition between Evans and P. Ryan. Now, coach say that basically it's P. Ryan's job to lose. If you ask me, I think that's a little bit of cap. Just given the fact that Chris Evans offers so much more to the offense, in terms of opening up the playbook. You can do more with Evans than you can with P. Ryan. Obviously, the main sticking point is, third down performance, which is going to be as much about being able to pick up blitzes and, understand pass rush scenarios to play pass pro. But with that being said, unless Chris Evans is just awful in pass pro, me personally, I could see a scenario for where if Chris Evans can overtake Samaje Perine in the preseason, I think it's a possibility that Perine may even be let go or traded for whatever they can get for him or whatever, depending on what they think about Travion Williams, because Perine does, I want to say he's getting like 1.7 this year, and at 1.7, that may be a hefty price to pay for a third running back who's not even really seeing the field on, you know, from scrimmage. You know what I'm saying? Too often, if P. Ryan ends up having the role that Chris Evans had last year in terms of snaps, then what they're paying for him is too much. So I can see P. Ryan actually ending up off the roster altogether. But then again, maybe Zach ain't capping, and maybe Evans just hasn't closed that gap yet. But we'll soon see. But that'll be so. Those the first two things I'll be looking for tomorrow night is, does Jackson Carman show improvement in preseason week 1, which, I mean, even still you'll take with a grain of salt, because Arizona's most likely not playing many of their starters tomorrow anyway. P. Ryan versus Evans, I think you could kind of, based on what you see and how you see them use Evans, I think that'll, if Evans gets a lot of touches, gets used in the run game, pass game, and he sees the field on third down, I think that'll kind of, to me, that would be an indication that he's about to step into that role, for the duration of the season. Also, you got the wide receiver 4 battle, which for my money, I mean, so far they're liking Stanley Morgan. He's making plays from scrimmage and practice. That said, Mike Thomas knows the system. You know what I'm saying? So that's going to be probably, I think, maybe the closest position battle. Maybe punter. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think maybe that might be the closest position battle, right? Between Stanley Morgan and Mike Thomas. They both add immense value on special teams, so I don't see either one of those guys getting cut. For me, the question becomes, if they don't think they have enough with them, between one of those two guys at wide receiver 4, do they increase using Evans as a receiver, as that fourth receiver, which he's capable of, or do they go out and sign a guy off the street? And if they do, what does that mean for Trent Irwin? I don't. Puka Williams, I believe they moved him from running back to receiver. He's got a shot to make the roster, but that wide receiver room is probably gonna get tight if neither Morgan nor Thomas shows them enough in the preseason to hand him the reins of that wide receiver 4 job. Because if they have to bring in somebody else, it's already kind of loaded, but it's loaded with back of the depth chart talent. The big three, the Migos, that is what that is. And I don't honestly think that fourth receiver spot is really going to play that much of a factor in the season with them bringing in Hayden Hurst. I think Hayden Hurst probably doesn't give us as much in the run game as Uzama does, but what he's going to pick up in the pass game in terms of targets and stuff, I think with the Migos already being there, I don't think a fourth receiver is going to be that big of a factor, especially when you consider that Mixon and Evans, according to everything I'm hearing about what's being done in training camp, that those guys are going to play a significant role in the pass game too, and there's only so many balls to go around, but that's going to be an interesting battle. But I ultimately think both guys end up on the team to play special teams, to cover punts and kicks regardless of who gets that fourth receiver spot. I think they'll both still end up being there. Now, another interesting, but I don't necessarily know how close it is, type of roster battle would be Tyson Anderson and Brandon Wilson for that fourth safety spot, right? Like, ultimately, we know what's up with the Jesse Bates situation. It's a done deal as far as this year. Far as I see, it's unlikely that Bates will be here in 23. It's just as unlikely that he won't play in 2022 and he'll actually sit out, because if you know your history, Bengals history, Mike Brown don't care. And Mike Brown ain't trying to hear nothing you talking about. You want to sit out? Sit out. Cool. We'll sit out until somebody come offer us a king's ransom in the trade, and then we'll ship you off. Me personally, I would love to see Jesse Bates stay, but I don't think, given his issues with missed tackles, is not terrible, but it's enough to where your safety position, you want a little bit more sure tackling. And the fact that he's only had 1 year where he played at an all pro level. He got snubbed like hell from the Pro Bowl. I want to say it was that 2020 season. Always overlooked. He was with the Bengals. It was a bad year. He got snubbed that year, but besides that year, he hasn't put up the type of numbers that would make you comfortable paying him $18 million a year, and even much less now that you got Dax Hill. But now the interesting thing is they drafted Tyson Anderson too, who some believe might be a huge steal. They got him in, I believe, in the 5th round, and some analysts had him with as high of a draft ranking, or you know what I'm trying to say. His draft projection was as high as 3rd round. Some guys had him as high as round 3. Excuse me. And from what I understand, I've been down there. I'm not sure. I wasn't exactly sure which number he was to be able to pay attention. But they've got a few safeties that got some size on them. And I believe one of them is Tyson Anderson, but he's also like ridiculously athletic, runs a 4.3, and he's huge at that position. So I think Anderson may be a sleeper for safety 4 this year, and then safety 3 next year if either Bell or Bates end up moving on. I think Tyson Anderson is probably the future in that 3rd safety spot. Brandon Wilson has been primarily a kick returner. He's been a good kick returner, but the heat is on for him when it comes to getting this. Well, actually, I don't even he's still injured right now, so he can't even actually participate in the position battle for kick returner 1. So it's going to get real tight for him, to where he may have to carve out his role as a safety to make the roster, depending on what happens and what other position group ends up taking that wide receiver, that kick returner 1 roster spot. And but he's more than capable of doing it. We haven't seen a lot of Brandon Wilson from scrimmage, but he's been for a late draft pick, bottom of the roster guy, you don't have no complaints. He does have some of that versatility that Anarumo loves, where he's a safety, but he can play a little bit of corner, just like Dax Hill can do. And you got Cam Taylor-Britt, that's a corner that can play a little bit of safety. So that whole secondary is going to be real fluid, and there's going to be a role for 3 to 4 of those guys in Anarumo's defense for sure. Even with everybody healthy, even with a full roster, there will be plays for a 4th safety. The question is, can Anderson get in there and solidify himself in that role in year 1 versus Brandon Wilson, who's been there but starting from behind the 8 ball because he's coming back off of injury. So that'll be interesting to see. Also, you got the punter battle, which, O State versus UC, Drew Chrisman versus Kevin Huber. Kevin Huber, a bit of a legend of sorts, no disrespect to the punters, but as much of a legend as you could probably make a punter out to be. Locally, he's a local guy. He's from Cincinnati, played high school, college, and pro his whole entire football career, been in Cincinnati. And he's been, I don't even think it's really too close. He's been the best punter the Bengals have had. If not in franchise history, you'd have to go all the way back to whoever was the punter when Jim Breach was the kicker, and even maybe then. So, but with that said, Kevin Huber hasn't exactly been Kevin Huber over the last 2 seasons. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been at the top of his game, and Father Time is undefeated. Now, Drew Chrisman, he, from everything I understand, he made a nice little push to make the roster last year, but, in the end, he lost out to Kevin Huber, but they were able to, I guess, hide him on practice squad. I'm not sure how he didn't get picked up by somebody else after having such a close contest for the starting job here. Usually punters, kickers, they get cut. A lot of punters and kickers don't. They almost never play snaps for the team that they started with in preseason in the regular season, especially if you're talking about young kickers and punters, right? And so, but like I said, we'll see how that goes. I think it really comes down to if I think honestly, my prediction is that if Chrisman is able to hold well for Shooter, if he's able to hold well for McPherson, regardless of which long snapper ends up winning out, if he's in sync with both of them as the holder, I think he'll probably get that position because he'll be the future. Kevin Huber, as punters go, you never know how long they're gonna play. But, you always, if you can move laterally with skill and get younger, you know, teams in any professional sport are gonna do that anytime. Younger, cheaper, and equally as good or better, no brainer. So I think that ends up going to Chrisman in my estimation, unless he ain't no good holding the ball. Then you got Apple versus Cam Taylor Britt. I honestly don't believe that for the preseason and training camp portion of the season that's going to be a true battle. I think Eli Apple, regardless of what happened in his stops before he got here, with what he showed, if nothing else, he's enough of a pro to keep the rookie off of his heels preseason while the rookie adjusts to the speed and skill of the NFL game. But I don't believe that it is a foregone conclusion that Eli Apple will be the starter through 16 weeks, 17 weeks in the postseason. Because we getting back in there. Now, excuse me. I don't believe that Taylor Britt will start. And I'm not saying I don't believe he'll start before week 8. And I'm not saying that I believe necessarily that he will start after week 8, but there is a chance, especially considering the fact that he's the future. At the same time, I believe Eli would have to revert to what he was before he got to Cincinnati in order for them to kind of like take food off of his plate in that manner, because regardless of what happens this year, I don't think there's a spot for Eli Apple on this roster next year, because he's kind of like in that prove it deal situation. And it's like this. The writing is on the wall for Eli, regardless of how he performs, right? It's almost the same thing like with Jesse Bates, right? Jesse Bates, I believe he's going to play on the franchise tag. He says he's not. That almost never happens, where a guy sits out a whole year. So if he don't get traded, he's going to play for the Bengals this year. And if Jesse Bates has a season like he had in 2020, there's no way the Bengals will be able to afford him. Now, Eli, on the other hand, he got to go up another level from what he was in 2021 in order to price himself out. But then the question will be if he stays static and he doesn't do enough to earn more than okay, they gave him 1 year, $4 million this year. Like, so if we say next year he does well enough or this year coming up, he does well enough where they're comfortable offering him 2 years at the same amount of money. Are the years enough? Is the money enough? Is there somebody else that wants to give him more? Somebody else that's a little bit more desperate? But the Bengals kind of made a power play with this draft. Not so much on Eli Apple, because I don't think it'll be that much of a, back and forth in terms of what he wants versus what he's able to actually command. The rub is really with Bates, right? That being said, the Bengals have positioned themselves to be able to lose either one of them guys, and of course, Von Bell is going to be a cheaper option to sign than Jesse Bates. So we have to see how that goes, right? Now, with that being said, in this last piece, before I get out of here, is not a question. It's not a roster battle per se, right? More of a question, right? So, is there any chance that Dax Hill starts over Bates or Bell week one, right? I'm not really aware of if he's been getting snaps at strong safety as well. I know he's taking Jesse's spot, for training camp with Jesse holding out or whatever, and so he's getting valuable reps there. But is there a world where Jesse Bates comes back and the Bengals feel like Hill can close the gap on what he needs to understand from the strong safety spot quick enough, or if it translates enough from strong safety to free safety. Like if you Mike Zimmer's old defense, the safeties were pretty much interchangeable. I don't think it's the same with Lou Anarumo, but I think it might be similar. So it's a question of if Bates comes back, do they say, well, hold on, Dax is doing his thing in that free safety one spot, and maybe Bates needs a week or two to get back, basically get some scratches on his helmet and whatnot, and kind of get back up to speed with contact and all of that, since he won't see any of it all the way in any of the preseason and training camp, right? Is it possible that Bates comes back and they feel like Bates is ready and they want to put Hill at the strong safety spot over Bell? A, because that gives them the best 11, and B, because the combination of Bates and Hill might let them do more than Bates and Bell, or Hill and Bell, because both Bates and Hill are better in coverage than Von Bell, right? But at the same time, that comes down to whether or not Dax Hill, if his athleticism can overcome Von Bell's veteran savvy, and that's a tall task because you can't take nothing from Von Bell, especially not the way he's played since he's been in Cincinnati. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, that's what we looking at. That's the things I'm gonna be looking at tomorrow night. How does Dax Hill perform against probably a mix of Arizona's ones and twos? What does Jackson Carman look like? And then what does, Tyson Anderson, what does he look like at safety when he gets on the field? What does Cam Taylor-Britt look like? He has a chance probably to boost his stock a little bit, because I imagine Apple and Cheeto will both sit, and the starting corners, I'm guessing, would probably be Taylor-Britt and Flowers, maybe. But at any rate, I think Taylor-Britt will probably be the corner who sees the best talent that Arizona puts on the field, which will probably be their tools. So he'll have a chance to make some waves. I think the Bengals have announced that both Huber and Chrisman they'll both play tomorrow. So that'll be like that roster battle will be under the microscope tomorrow. Morgan and Thomas, I don't know how much, because they're vying for the wide receiver 4 spot. So that with the Bengals sitting their starters, they'll be in the 1 or 2. Those positions they won't be doing in those roles what they'll actually be doing as the wide receiver 4. So I don't know what that's gonna pan out to. And again, Carmen probably won't be seeing starters, and if he do, he'll only be seeing starters for a series or two, and then he might only play a series or two. So we really will be looking at Volson and seeing what he does against other twos, right? Evans, P. Ryan, that'll be probably one of the main things I'm paying attention to. It's really just who makes the plays, and can Evans get somewhere. They really trust P. Ryan with pass protection more so than even they trust Joe Mixon, which I don't care. It doesn't matter. You trust P. Ryan more on third and fourth down than you trust Joe Mixon because of pass pro. But with third and one, fourth and one, with the whole world on the line, your best players need to be on the field, period, point blank. I don't give a damn who you trust more. Who's got the athletic profile? Who's got the dynamic background to where they can make something out of nothing? No disrespect to P Ryan, and I know I'm going on a little rant about the Super Bowl because we was this close. But the thing about P Ryan is P Ryan as a running back to me is a little bit of what Andy Dalton was as a quarterback. He can get you over the hump if everything else goes right. So hopefully we see Evans push P Ryan out of that halfback two spot because with a better line too, that's just another fold between a better line, a tight end that's more of a receiver than what Uzo was, and um, and a running back that can split out wide and be trusted to run routes like a receiver and catch the ball like a wide receiver. Offense is going to be wide open if uh, Evans can carve out a nice size role for himself. So that's what I'm looking at. But yeah, man, buckle up. I think it's gonna be a good one. We're gonna start to see what the middle of our roster looks like. And if you know this game, for real, the middle of the roster a lot of times determines, do you get over those humps? Because injury is just a part of the game. So as much as we not looking at the top of the roster, this is still a pretty, pivotal preseason in terms of depth because it's next man up. So we what we looking for tomorrow night is we looking for them guys who will get in and at least be competent against other team starters, in the event of injury. Like we had a lot of, injury luck last year. It's something that we unfortunately can't count on year in, year out. So that the middle and the back of that roster need to be, need to be tight. And I think position group wise, the offensive line was so bad last year that even with the guys that was starters going to the backups, that was ones going to tools, Isaiah Prince, Akeem Adeniji, those guys, even with them being tools, we need to see improvement from them as tools, right? But if they take that step, the offensive line, like I said, with Adeniji and Prince being better than last year and being um, second string as opposed to starters. Also with Cordell Volson being a fringe starter, if he can really give Carmen a real battle in that position, that makes the O line depth pretty good if that happens. I think wide receiver depth is going to be a question all year, unless they go in and bring somebody else in at wide receiver four. Like last year, they tried to bring in D.D. Westbrook, but it didn't end up working. I think he ended up signing with Minnesota and even might have made a play or two against us when we played them last year. But I think it could be the same situation right there. Where if nothing else, they try to go and find a speed guy for as the fourth wide receiver and really open this thing all the way up. Um, what other positions do I think will be corner depth? I think is good. Not the best, but I think they fine. D line is stacked. The linebackers, I think we have better depth. We got a better linebacker room than most people will acknowledge until some point in the middle of the season. If y'all remember last year when we had that rash of injuries where ADG went out and Wilson went out and Pratt was the only healthy starter, but guys like Joe Bocci and I want to say it's Clay Johnston, I think, and Marcus Bailey, those guys actually came off the bench and did work. So, I'm more comfortable at linebacker probably than most people will be. Safety, like I said, they loaded at safety because they got a bunch of young guys who could blossom into starters. One Hill might be a starter already. So, um, um, in terms of depth, like I said, the main thing we looking at the middle of the O line roster, the bottom of the D line roster, the bottom of the corner roster, and bottom of the wide receiver roster. But like I said, I think honestly, wide receiver, unless they bring in a fourth guy from outside, it's just gonna kind of be what it is. But get in the comments, let me know what y'all think. What's gonna be the tightest battles? What you most interested in, and give me some record predictions too. I'll break it down at another time, maybe at the end of the preseason, depending on what I think I see from observing these games. But I give y'all a pre-prediction right now. I'm saying they do at least 12-5. 12-5, 13-4. That's what I'm seeing out of this roster. If it looked like what it's supposed to be, if what it is on paper start to show up on film, that's what we gonna have going on. But it's been a while. I'm about to be back in here more regularly. I ain't been bullshitting. Life just been getting in the way during the slow season, but I promise you I'm about to be back at it full speed ahead. Stripe gang. Gang in this bitch, we out.